Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly. On this episode, I'm joined by fly fishing guru Kevin Howell. Kevin shares his experiences growing up and fishing in Western North Carolina, the backstory of Davidson River Outfitters, and all of the details for DRO's 30th anniversary celebration. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. But before we get to the interview, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you like the podcast, please tell a friend, and please subscribe and leave us a rating and review in the podcatcher of your choice. It really helps us out. And a shout out to this episode's sponsor. Our friends at Southern Culture on the Fly recently dropped their spring issue. You can check it out and all of the other skullduggery at www.southerncultureonthefly.com. Rumor has it, there's even new merch. Head on over there today. Now, on to our interview. Well, Kevin, welcome to The Articulate Fly.
Thanks, Marvin. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And we have a tradition on The Articulate Fly. We always like to ask our guests to share their earliest fishing memory.
Earliest fishing memory, boy. I would say I was probably 3-4 years old and remember catching bluegill with my father out of a neighborhood farm pond on a fly.
Yeah. And it's funny too, right? Because you come from a pretty famous fly fishing family. Did you always fly fish, or is that something that you sort of had to come to a little bit later on in your fishing career?
Well, and I do come from a pretty good lineage of fly fishing background there, but my father also was a huge bass angler, which a lot of people don't know, and won the United Bass Fisherman Classic back in 1976, and so I grew up equally fly fishing rod in one hand and casting and spinning gear and bass fishing in the other hand. So we would bass fish all the way through until end of April, 1st of May, and then we started trout fishing, and that went until deer season, and then deer season went till it was time to go back to bass fishing. So that's how I grew up.
Did you have to sprinkle in any turkey hunting in the spring?
No, fortunately, I never got into that because my wife says I need just one more hobby to really, not be around the house. So.
Yeah, my experience is that could, I think, ruin you more than even saltwater fishing could.
Probably, and that's ruined me enough. So yeah. We'll leave the turkey hunting to the experts.
Yeah. And so I think the interesting thing is, you and I are kind of a similar vintage, and I was really kind of curious, what was it like growing up in a fly fishing and fishing family in the 70s and the 80s, and there was no internet, and everyone hadn't gone nuts over a river runs through it. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I grew up in a time when the green drakes were still prevalent on the Davidson and other area streams. And I can remember going to fish the green drake hatch on the Davidson, and there'd be 5 anglers there, and I was related to 3 of them. So, you'd see 3 or 4 other guys, all evening. And now if there's a halfway decent hatch of any kind, you have to take your own rock to stand on. So it was unique to grow up in a time when it was literally very few people in the sport, but then at the same time we didn't have the technology and the waders and the I remember wet wading as a kid in the 70s and 80s when you'd start wet wading in March or April and freezing absolutely to death, and now I'm kind of thankful I've got those waders. So
yeah. But back when wet wading probably meant wearing a pair of cutoff jeans and a pair of Chuck Taylors, right?
That or my father and uncle would buy old Vietnam era combat boots and grind the soles off and glue felt to them to have traction. So,
yeah. And so I know your dad and your uncle had a shop. Was that part of your growing up too, or did that kind of come later?
Sure. Yeah. They had Dwight and Don's Custom Tackle, and I asked them why they never had a storefront, and they did for a little while in my father's basement. They would sell fly tying material and stuff, but they quickly got rid of that because they said it tied them down, and they had to be there and have hours instead of being on the streams and filling orders or whatever when they could or wanted to, and fish when they wanted to. So I grew up, tying flies for them. By the time I was 13, I was tying commercially for a lot of shops around the area and everything. So was quite the experience to grow up and, be producing flies at that age and seeing them go into other stores and see your flies there that you'd produced.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. And I know your dad and your uncle were really important mentors to you, but who are some of the other folks that have mentored you on your fly fishing journey, and what have they taught you?
Boy, that list is long. One thing about fly fishing is when you quit learning, I think you're done fly fishing. So there's always somebody or someone to teach you stuff. And I'm really good friends with Bob Klauser, have gotten to be over the years. And Bob taught me a lot about tying simplistic designs and using materials that make you make the flies have a little more life in them, a little more swimmy or just a little more lifelike. But keeping them simple at the same time, where you could tie them quickly and replace them. And if some client lost them, it wasn't the end of the world, and you could go on. And Lefty taught me a lot about casting and that kind of stuff. So they were both great mentors. But even my clients, just being out there with them and watching stuff they do and seeing what works or may not work and learning from that. And then in a lot of my travels to South America and Alaska and other stuff, you learn from guides and other locations that, hey, they do stuff this way, and that may make it better or worse, or you learn little tips and techniques from them too. So really, Bob Klauser, Lefty, huge mentors for me, but really everybody I've come in contact with down the line of my fishing career has really helped influence me to where I am today.
Yeah, that's neat. It's funny too, because there's the Fish TV internet television service, and they have like all of those like 1980s and 1990s VHS tapes that Bob and Lefty did together. It's kind of cool to watch those.
It is, and old school, and it's a lot of people say, "Oh, well, that's old. It doesn't work." And I'm here to tell you, as a guide, it works just as good today as it did back then. So
yeah, it's neat too to see him. I remember watching the one relatively recently. Just it's literally, I think, an hour and a half on just the Klauser minnow, and I mean, just to listen to him talk about the proportions and how he likes to fish it and the variations was just super cool.
Yeah, and the proportions and where the eyes go influences how it falls, which will influence how the fish will hit it and if they'll hit it or won't hit it. So
yeah,
a lot to be said for learning from those guys that spent so much time on the water. And that's going back to what you asked a minute ago about being there before the technology. Is in the 70s and 80s, it was trial and error. You tried it. If it worked, you improved and worked and tweaked on it. And now a lot of stuff you can get online and find and whatever, and people aren't having to make that trial and error discovery.
yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Because I mean, there wasn't any YouTube, and to your point, you had to figure it out, and a lot of times it was really hard to get materials. And I mean, I can remember as a kid, getting like newsletters that people literally like ran off a bajillion copies and like put a sticker with your name on it and put it in the mail to you.
Yeah, and we were buying materials from wholesale feather companies, and there wasn't a fly tying company down the street. So when you bought black saddle feathers, you bought a pound of them. And let me tell you, a pound of black saddle feathers goes a long way.
Yeah, not to mention that's even after you throw away half of them, right?
That's right.
So, as you mentioned, you've been really fortunate to travel all over the world to fish. And I was kind of curious if you had one particular place or one particular trip that kind of stood out more than any others.
For me, there's two places. I do a lot of stuff in the Canadian Shield for smallmouth bass, and that area up there, I love it. It's remote. It's one place my cell phone doesn't work, so it gets me back to those times, when I grew up of trial and error discovery, and you can't find it all on the internet and all that. So I really, really enjoy my time up there, and I go up every year and spend 1 to 2 weeks up there smallmouth fishing. And then my other favorite place, Argentina, definitely has a spot in my heart where, lots of nice brown trout and rainbow trout. Fishing's good. And again, not a lot of pressure and people, and just a place I really enjoy being.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I know I imagine you still work with the guys at Andy's Drifters, which I guess is now set. And I can remember going to Argentina with them probably in 2006 or 7 and running into Gustavo this past year on the fly fishing show circuit and catching up, which was really neat.
Yeah. I was partners with Gustavo for many years, and they had the opportunity to grow and move on to set, which was wonderful. And they've done that, and I still go down and spend my time down there with them and other friends, that I've made down there over the years. So
yeah, I'm not probably will never Dorado fish, but the trout fishing is pretty good.
Oh, the trout fishing is phenomenal. People ask what it's like, and you can't explain it. So
yeah, it's kind of like talking about the dove hunting down there, where it's like, well, how many birds do you shoot? And it's like, well, how much do you want to pay for shotgun shells? Is really the question.
Exactly.
So Kevin, when did you realize that you wanted to make your living in fishing?
I was probably, I don't know, 10, 12 years old, and you'd get outdoor life, and you'd see all those guys, Ted Williams and all those guys that were fishing, and they were professional guides or professional fishermen, and you'd see other shows like Flip Palette, Walker's Cay Chronicles, when we grew up and all that. And I knew from that age on, I'm like, man, I want to figure out how I can fish for a living, because that's what I love doing. So yeah, I fished much as I could. Went off, got an engineering degree, and designed some houses and stuff for a little while, and taught some architecture classes, and decided that I was a lot happier when I was fishing. So I went back to fishing.
There you go. So when did you start guiding?
I got it a little bit from my father and uncle in the late 80s, early 90s. And then in 96, I started guiding full time for Davidson River Outfitters.
Very neat. And so what was the guide community like back then in kind of like the late 80s and into the 90s?
So when I first started guiding in the western 23 counties of North Carolina that have trout, there were 40 licensed hunting and fishing guides, and some of those were hunting and some were fishing. But there were 40 licensed guides the first year when I was guiding and stuff. And now I don't know exactly what the number is, but we estimate that there's like 500 or something in these western 23 counties. So.
Youch. Yeah. So what was
it? Growth.
Yeah. So what was it like? I mean, so like legitimately you could probably go have beers with, a third to half of the guides in Western North Carolina when you started out. What was it like to be able to kind of get together with kind of the original guys, really?
Sure. Yeah. There was myself and Mac Brown, Roger Lowe. We were really some of the first ones over here, Walker Parrott. And, we, like you said, we could call each other and say, hey, man, you want to meet for lunch or dinner or a beer or whatever in the off season. And, we'd all sit around and talk about what was good and what was bad. And, if we were seeing trends on a certain river, we'd all kind of help each other out. And, now I know a lot of the guides in the state, but I don't know. I wouldn't claim to know half of them.
Yeah.
I do know, probably 100, 150, but still that's not even half of what we're talking about. So,
yeah. Other than numbers, how have you seen the guide game evolve over the years?
I really have seen a change in the guide game. Used to, the guides were all about teaching and the experience and making people or helping people understand, why fish did what they did or why you should fish here or why you shouldn't fish here, and, understanding hatches and all the nuances of it. And Today it seems it's just hey, I want to go catch fish. It doesn't matter how. I don't care what I learn about it. And so I've seen that change in the guides of they don't teach and they don't educate as much as they used to, and they're more about just putting fish on a internet for somebody to admire or whatever. So I'd say that's been one of the biggest changes, which I hate, because I really think everybody getting into it needs to understand some of the basics, and I'm not sure that that's all being taught to them.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I think, it's been pretty consistent. I've kind of always followed that Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation study, and pretty consistently, probably somewhere between, 45 and 50% of the people that fly fish a year only fish 1 to 3 days. So it makes it kind of hard.
It does make it hard. And we see that all the time, and people will come in the shop and they fish for, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, maybe even a week while they're here. And then we'll see them a year later and they're like, yep, I hadn't fished since I saw you last year. And it makes it harder for them, for the casting and everything, but it also, slows down, some of the learning process. You can't teach them to cast if they don't go home and practice it a little bit or something like that. So it makes it interesting for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting too, right? Because, back to kind of what we were talking about kind of the way we learned about sports and things, I think now younger generations like to have more different experiences than as opposed to having one or two things that they do a lot.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
I would agree, and a lot of people, because of cell phones or whatever, also want instant gratification. And as you and I know from growing up, boy, some days you struggle to catch a fish, and that's not instant gratification at all.
Oh, yeah. Or you tell your mom you're bored and she puts a broom in your hand. They'll take care of it too.
Exactly. So. Yeah.
So with sort of these trends that you were seeing, Kevin, was that what made you want to start the North Carolina Guide and Outfitters Association?
Sure. What we were seeing, and again, it comes back to those of us that talk to each other and everything. We were seeing guides that were unsafe rowing people down the river. Like, you're like, oh, wow, look, they're going to crash and dump that person out. And they would. And you'd see other stuff going on. And we're like, we just need to kind of get some professionalism back in this, and be sure that the guides all have first aid and CPR and, that kind of stuff. So we really wanted to make it just a more professional group of individuals. And the other thing is, when you tell somebody that you're a fishing guide down at the insurance commission and, hey, I want to get insurance, then they put you on a crab boat in the Bering Sea because you said fishing. And, we're not nearly that dangerous of an occupation. So if we can unite and be a little more professional, then we can get better insurance rates and stuff for the guides across the state. So,
yeah.
And then we want to also get back to some of that education, and we want to offer that to clients and stuff throughout the state. So.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because folks may not understand this, but like out west, guiding is heavily regulated, right? Whether it's outfitter guide system, but I think basically North Carolina, you just have to have $35, right?
Well, if you're a resident of North Carolina, it's a $16 guide license, and there's no prerequisites to first aid, CPR, anything. And for that $16, I'm a licensed hunt fish guide, so I can take firearms and guide somebody hunting just as easily as I can take somebody and hand them a rod and go fishing. And so we're trying to get that separated, where you're either a hunting guide or a fishing guide, and that'll, like you said, we're not trying to over-regulate or get rid of anybody. We're just trying to make it a little more professional, a little more respectable community of people that are watching out for resources and each other.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I've been fortunate to fish a lot of places out west, and I've never thought that the way that they regulated outfitters and guides was obtrusive. It was really kind of the stuff you're talking about, like, somebody knows where you're fishing. If we're recording days to kind of manage fishing pressure that's happening, and there's some insurance and a little bit of safety, right?
Right, exactly. And we're seeing more and more pressure here. So, as an angler, if I'm not a guide, if I take myself out of that and I ask myself, well, gee, I want to go fish the Davidson today, and I roll in there and there's 35 guides up there. Well, that kind of, really makes a burden on me to go find fish and do that kind of stuff. So, we're kind of thinking the same thing, like you said, of, how many guides should be on this river with clients this day, and trying to get some of that so that the anglers have more opportunities or equal opportunities if they're not being guided.
Yeah. And I guess, people that haven't fished out west ought to feel lucky because, either we'll figure that out for ourselves or somebody's going to tell us. Because, literally like in Montana, it's like, this is how many days you get to float this river, right?
Exactly. And that's where we were at as guides, is we're like, look, we would much rather come in here and regulate and control ourselves instead of somebody sitting in a cubicle somewhere going, no, this is the way you're going to do it.
Yeah.
So he may not be a fisherman,
Yeah. But I also think too, it's great because I think it's hard where, obviously, you can go through a shop like yours or some of the other ones in the area, but, for the most part, guide trips are generally cost about the same. So it's really hard for the consumer to kind of figure out who they should go fish with.
Right. And, we want to provide a resource for those customers that, you can look this person up and see that they're licensed by the Guides Association and have all their first aid and CPR and that kind of stuff. Or, maybe this person doesn't. And we see a lot of guys that drift in, hand out business cards and, oh, I'm a guide, and they don't have any insurance or paying any forest service fees. And see, a lot of people don't realize that as a guide, when we guide in Pisgah or Nantahala or whatever national forest, that a percentage of our trip gets paid directly to the forest to maintain the trails and the fishery or the streamside restoration or whatever. So, off every trip, we're paying a portion of that. And you get somebody who comes in who isn't paying that, but they're still abusing the resource, then that's when we're like, all right, look, we need to all help the resource. That's how we make our living.
Yeah. So. Yeah, absolutely. And so how are you, do people kind of sign up and pay a fee? How are you kind of delivering services to your members?
Yeah. So we're really, like you said, we're just getting started. And, our big thing right now is I'm working, trying to get some legislation through to get the hunt fish guide separated to a hunting guide or a fishing guide. And we'll be having another big meeting in September of all the guides across Western North Carolina that want to participate. And so they can either email me directly or email Jessica Whitmire at Headwaters or the Tuck Fly Shop. Most of the fly shops will have Matt Canner at Brookings. We're all part of it and can get them in touch and keep them in touch for when the next meeting is going to be.
Got it. And what I'll do is I'll drop that in the show notes so people can find you and send you an email and not miss out.
Okay. I appreciate that.
You bet. And so, most people know you as the owner of Davidson River Outfitters, but you haven't always owned the shop. You want to kind of share with our listeners how you came to be the owner?
Sure. So, like we were talking earlier, I grew up in a fishing family and knew it was something I wanted to do. And I was working as an engineer and stuff. And my father was battling colon cancer for a second time. And I was helping him run his custom fly tying business and doing engineering work. And I had the opportunity. The guy who owned the shop, Larry Hall, came to my father and said, "Hey, do you want to manage it?" And he said, "No." Said, I'm going through this battle with cancer, and I don't know from day to day if, how good I'm going to feel. And so I went to Larry and I said, "Look, I'm willing to manage it for you if you'll let me set my schedule. So on the days I think Dad's going to feel good, I can go fishing with him. And when I'm done, I'll sit in the back. Other than the responsibilities at the shop, I'll sit in the back and tie tie flies to help him out. And he's like, that'll be fine. And so that's how I got started there in 95 and 96. And the shop at that point in time was open 3 days a week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And we slowly started to expand, with me managing it. And I was doing most of the guiding, had one other fellow helping me. And we did all of like 50 guide trips in 96. And this year we'll do about 3,000. So we've had a little bit of growth there. But, I came to it that way. And then when my father passed away in 98 and Larry's mother was really sick, Larry came to me and wanted to know if I wanted to purchase the shop. So I purchased it in 98. And I've been there ever since.
Yeah. And is it always been on that same corner? I mean, I know it's been a while since you built the new location on that corner heading into Pisgah, but has it always been there?
No, we were across the street on the Hendersonville Highway side of the intersection for the first 4 or 5 years. And then we came into the little plaza where we're at now. We were there on the opposite corner where the little carpet store is at now. And we had 7-foot ceilings and 9-foot fly rods. So that was an interesting predicament. We ended up cutting holes in the ceiling where the rods could stick up through the ceiling to allow the 9-foot rods in there. And so we did that. And then we were over beside the barbecue restaurant for a handful of years. And then, like you said, had the opportunity to move where we're at now and expand and plan on being there for a while.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I guess the quote new space is super neat because you kind of built it out, obviously the way you want it. It's got nice educational space, and I highly recommend the brewery, and the barbecue's not too bad either. So,
yeah, exactly.
So for folks that aren't familiar, why don't you kind of tell us, because you do a lot at the shop, other than just kind of, the kind of what people think about a fly shop. You want to kind of share with folks all the stuff you do, from travel to guide trips and in and out of the Pisgah and all that kind of good stuff?
Sure. So, first we run a huge guide operation. We have 12 guides working out of there. And we run that 24/7. Well, not 24/7, but we run it 7 days a week and year round. Summertime, we transition a little more to smallmouth bass to give the trout a break in the heat of the summer, and do trout all year, or the other part of the year, or majority of the year. And we got half-day wade trips, full-day wade trips on public or private water. We got float trips for trout or for smallmouth bass or for muskie. So we have all those species covered. And then on an educational front, we do a lot of what we call 101 and 201 classes, which are just, hey, I've never held a fly rod before, I want to learn. So we do a lot of those. And then we do a lot of specialized classes. One thing about my staff is I have a very diverse staff that has a guy Jeb Hall, who's an exceptional spay caster and an exceptional fly tying instructor. We have a Tenkara expert. We have Euro nymphing experts. We have myself, who's a certified casting instructor. So we do all the educational stuff we can. I even teach rod building classes in the wintertime. So we have that going as well. And I got my start in the industry tying flies and building rods. So we have what I hope to be is one of the largest fly tying departments in the Southeast here, where you can find any type of material that you need in there when you tie flies. And then we run all the fly tying classes and different types of classes for that. And then in addition to that, we do a lot of destination and worldwide travel. We do trips to Montana, Bahamas, Argentina, Mexico. I'm opening stuff up in Brazil. I'm going down to a new fishery this year in January, and we'll have that up for 2024. It'll be a new option. So yeah, do a lot of travel stuff as well.
Yeah, it's neat too. And it's amazing because I didn't realize till I started talking to some of the guys in the shop that I guess given how mild our climate is, I mean, these guys, they got a ton of days a year. Like, I mean, they've got probably twice as many days as a lot of guys in Montana and places like that.
Yeah, so Argentina, Montana, Alaska, those guys have a 120 to a 180-day season, and that's it. You're done. And with our climate here, most of my guides average 200 days a year on the water to 225, 250. We found if you do more than about 225 or 250, you just get a little too surly to be around. So we really try and limit it to 200 or 225 days a year.
Yeah.
So.
And I think too, for folks that haven't fished it, I think, your private water is really great. And I think one of the things I really like about it, Kevin, is it's not like some of the other places where people have private water where, the fish are all pelleted up. I mean, these are fish that are still pretty technical and hard to catch.
Sure, they're Davidson fish, and we manage it for access, and we do stock it, once or twice as needed to replace whatever we feel may have been lost or killed by mishandling or otters or beavers or predation, whatever caused it. And but we like to have it in a natural setting as possible, and not to have everybody out there throwing, cork pellet flies at them and that kind of stuff. So.
We won't make fun of any of our friends in North Georgia.
No.
So, I think a lot of people kind of in our part of the world are familiar with the Davidson, they're familiar with the mills, but there are just a ton of places to fish around your shop. You want to share some of the other places folks may not know about?
Sure. All of the upper stretches, the North Fork, East Fork, West Fork, all have great trout fishing opportunities. Places like Courthouse Creek, West Fork of the Pigeon River, drainage, the Big East Fork of the Pigeon, just across the mountain there on 276 from us. Another great fishery, Looking Glass Creek, and all the tributaries of the Davidson. All those are exceptional fisheries.
Yeah. And it's great too, because, it's funny. It's a little bit of an extra drive for me. So I usually like to, when I come fish around Brevard, I usually try to come for 2 days, and you've got a Hampton Inn just across the street. And then you got a bunch of hotels up in Fletcher. And, I don't know. I always tell people to go up there and they owe it to themselves to at least have one or two beers at Sierra Nevada too.
Yeah, Sierra Nevada. And then, of course, we got Oscar Blues Brewery right in town. And like you said, Acosta Brewing earlier. And we now have a place called Pilot right across from the shop there that has some really nice rental cabins. And, you can come get you a cabin for a long weekend or whatever and stay right there on next to the river and fish and enjoy.
Yeah. And so the super neat thing is on June 10th, you guys are going to be celebrating your 30th anniversary. What do you have planned for folks, Kevin?
That's right. So 30 years in the fly fishing industry. So we got a huge day planned. We have staff coming in from Grundon's with their new waiters from corporate. Grundon's will be here as well as their sales representatives to talk about their waiters and what makes them different and new to the market and what their goals are with those. And then we have spay casting with Jeb. We have free class in that. We have a free kicking car class with Landon. Rob Lilly's going to do a free Euro nymphing class in the afternoon. I'll be doing some fly tying along with Bob Klauser. We'll be there for a couple of hours doing some fly tying demos and that kind of stuff. And then our big event is we're having a freaky fly tying contest. And everybody's like, well, what is a freaky fly tying contest? And it's all in fun. We're going to supply some strange, weird, exotic materials and see what kind of flies get produced out of them. And, whoever wins will win a big prize pack supplied by Semperfly. And then we got some hackles from Hairline and other places. So a lot of fly tying material to be given away to those participants in that freaky fly tying contest. So that's going to be out there. We've got free lunch, free beer, food, drink, all that good stuff. And Leslie Holmes will be there doing casting from G. Loomis. So yeah, it's going to be a huge day, June the 10th. So swing on by and enjoy the day with us.
Yeah. And so and what time does it start?
So we're going to open our normal 8:00 time, but most of the other stuff will get started at 9.
Gotcha.
So,
And so if people want to do the classes, I know they're free, but do they need to sign up in advance or do they just show up?
no, the classes, they just need to show up. They can go to our website, davidsonflyfishing.com, and we got a schedule of when everything is. The only thing that you need to sign up for is the fly tying contest, because we have like 8 vices to use at a time. So we're going to rotate people through in groups of 8. So we just need them to sign up so we can orchestrate how many groups of 8 we need to move through there.
Gotcha. And obviously, do folks need to bring boots and waders if they're going to do like a spay casting class, or are those going to be mostly demos that they can watch from the bank?
It never hurts. Throw them in. And the other thing I'll say is throw them in. You'll have them there for that. And then, hey, when we're done, slide up in the forest and go fishing for a couple hours. So.
Well, there you go. And is there anything else, Kevin, you want to share with our listeners before we let you go this evening?
No, just enjoy your time on the water. And, if anybody ever has any questions, feel free to email me, call me. I've been here a long time and more than willing to help and share my knowledge. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that, what's the best way for folks to kind of learn more about the shop and follow all of your fishing adventures on and off the water?
So, davidsonflyfishing.com is our website, and we've got a blog there as well as all of our website, e-store, that kind of stuff. And then you can find us on Instagram, Davidson River Outfitters, Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff on all the social media platforms.
Well, there you go. And I'll drop all that stuff in the show notes too.
Thank you.
You betcha. And Kevin, I really appreciate you spending some time with me this evening, and hopefully I'll be able to make it your way on June 10th.
All right. Look forward to seeing you, Marvin. Take care.
You too. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. Again, if you like the podcast, please tell a friend, and please subscribe and leave us a rating and review in the podcatcher of your choice. Tight lines, everybody.